The Walking Dead: A New Frontier is technically the third season of Telltale's Walking Dead series, a series that I'm a massive fan of. While this is technically the third season, I refuse to accept it as such, since the game doesn't really have any ties to season 1 or 2, so the game is standalone, which actually sounded like a good idea, but unfortunately, this newest season of The Walking Dead was very disappointing, for me at least. What a surprise, something disappointed me again. But before we get into it, this video is highly recommended for people who have beaten the game, and maybe season 1 and 2 as well, since a lot of what I will be talking about will come out of nowhere and people who have not played the game will probably get confused by what I'm saying. So go watch it on YouTube or something and then come back. Also, I know that the season just recently concluded, but it's the type of video in which I feel I have to spoil things, so this is your spoiler warning. And with this video, this is just how I feel, just my own opinion. I feel like I should just get this out of the way. Don't take it personally if I disagree with you, as I'm totally fine about you enjoying something that I don't enjoy. If you were able to enjoy this season, then that's great, and I'm glad you did, but I didn't enjoy it, hence the video. When it comes to games, I would say my standards are usually very high, but they're not unattainable in the slightest. If I'm not allowed to demand that something's done better, then nothing will ever actually be done better. I didn't exactly have the highest hopes for this game, but maybe you'll get what I mean. So in this video, I aim to explain all my problems with this new season. This isn't really a review, but more a look at what I think the game does poorly and some of what the game does well near the end of the video. The reason I'm calling it a review though is just because I wasn't sure what else to call it. By the time this video gets uploaded, I might have come up with a new title, so who knows what it will actually be called. I like discussing games and trying to go in depth to look for flaws or problems to present to people, but that is usually just seen as hating and nitpicking for some reason. I can't understand why that sort of thing bothers people, since if you're a fan of a game or a series, like I am with this specific series, then you would want to look for flaws with it and see if you still feel the same about the game despite those flaws. It's not as if I'm the only person who's nitpicky and biased, but if that sort of approach bothers you, maybe don't watch my videos because I'll probably just end up pissing you off with my opinions. But if I do piss you off, that's your problem, not mine. I'm not going to change the way I look at games just because it may not be what you want to see. This isn't directed to anyone and I'm not trying to be a dickhead, but I feel it needed to be said anyway. That's my mini rant over, so let's just move on. I can't believe I'm already ranting about something. If I'm being completely honest, this video feels like a bit of a mess, where I just kind of say things completely out of context, hence why I recommend this video to people who have completed the game already. I don't know, you can let me know what you thought when the video is over, but I figured that I should just release the video instead of trying to make it absolutely perfect, which just isn't possible. So let's get started with chapter 1, or part 1, whatever you want to call it. So let's, as an example, start off with a choice from the first episode. Clementine gets bullets from the sky that turn out to be blanks, and these blanks almost cause Clementine and Javier to get killed. So when Clementine gets back to the sky, she starts taunting him by shooting these blank bullets at him. Javier then comes over to help out, and as this happens, one of the most tensionless and laughably bad attempts at a fight happens. This guy simply stands up, grabs his knife, and then tries to stab Javier. I have no words for this, but it's just hilarious. And then all of a sudden, the guy just gets shot by Clementine. How the hell did that happen? Did he put an actual bullet in with the blanks he gave to Clementine? And that one bullet just so happened to be one of the few that Clementine shot at this guy? And in just the first episode of this new season, it actually leads to probably the easiest decision in any of the Walking Dead games. Lie to these people that you don't know, stating that it was self-defense, siding with Clem, or sell out the best character in the game. Telltale, are you serious? Is anyone actually going to choose this option? This is a terrible decision, and unless you for some reason hated Clementine in the other games, you will not be selling her out like that. Anyway, my point here is that regardless of whether you defended Clem or not, or essentially sided with these people you don't know, Tripp still offers to take the two back to the junkyard to find Javier's family. Why would he do this? How can this benefit him or his group in any way? Why is he prioritizing a guy he just met over his own people? He's supposed to be the leader of this place, right? This is just the first of many examples in which people just randomly help Javier for no reason. Well, there is a reason, and it's because he's the main character. But getting back on track, the point again is that no matter what you choose, Tripp or Eleanor will still take you back to the junkyard. So that choice was completely pointless in the end. Another example is early on in the game when you first meet Clementine. She offers to help Javier find his family if you give her your van in return, but even if you refuse, the game just decides for you and carries on as if you accepted. What a surprise. Seriously though, in a game where your choices are supposed to matter, why is stupid shit like this still happening? I imagine Telltale assumed no one would refuse Clementine, which is a pretty safe assumption, but even still, that's some lazy ass writing. So, something that pissed off a lot of people, myself included, is that depending on what ending you chose in Season 2, you'll get a half-assed explanation as to why certain characters aren't in Season 3. These flashbacks are honestly the worst thing about the first episode, and maybe the whole game. It's absolutely bullshit that these were handled so poorly, and it's so obvious that they just did them so that people wouldn't complain about the characters not being in the new season. And by doing that, you've given people something to actually complain about. So let's quickly go through them, shall we? Jane is pregnant with Luke's kid because they had sex in episode 4 of Season 2. So Jane just commits suicide. What more could you honestly expect from someone like Jane? Yeah, she was right about Kenny in the end, but her actions make her seem just as insane as Kenny was becoming, and I can't believe some people actually decided to stay with her. Another flashback was Clem and AJ in Wellington, when all of a sudden, a random group shows up and pretty much murders everyone, causing Clementine to leave in a hurry with the character whose name I don't remember. This one doesn't make much sense, but that's to be expected when nobody actually put effort into these flashbacks. Why bother doing that when we can just unintentionally piss people off by tying up all those loose ends? And what about Kenny? Beloved character and absolute asshole to many. Well, he gets in a car crash with Clem and AJ, flies through the front window, and is then eaten by walkers because he's broken his legs. What the fuck is this? How is Clem also not injured, considering she was the one who was actually driving? Although, to be perfectly honest, I know nothing about driving, so don't quote me on that. But how the hell did Kenny land where he did? Surely he should have just landed in front of the car, not to the right of it. And then his actual death. Just such a waste of what was a great character. They could have had Kenny go out in a blaze of glory or something, but this is honestly just fucking bullshit. Luckily though, I didn't choose any of these endings, so I think I got the best one. Long story short, Clem gets her hand stuck in a door and then has to rip her own pinky off because Telltale didn't put Clem for enough shit in Season 2. And when I say best, I just mean in the sense that at least no great characters were just thrown away like garbage. And here's the main thing that pissed me off. It's not bad that Telltale want to create a new story, that's honestly great, but don't do shit like this to longtime fans of the series by just randomly killing off these characters because you decided you wanted to do something new all of a sudden. And it's so painfully obvious that they were just tying up all those loose ends. That's just disrespectful and it's honestly a waste of time. I'm glad Clementine and AJ are there at least, but Clem can only do so much when her inclusion in the game was an unnecessary addition. I love that Clementine is in the game, but nothing would really be different if she wasn't there. Luckily, the choices do get a lot better in episodes 3 and 4, and things do start to pick up. And I'm not saying that the choices weren't bullshit in seasons 1 and 2, they were, but because it would have impacted characters we cared about, we don't really think about it when it's happening and when we're in the moment, and that's clearly what they tried, and failed to do with season 3. But let's take a quick look at some choices in episodes 3 and 4, since those episodes had the best choices to me. Episode 3's choices were actually all pretty interesting and difficult to make. I felt like I should be staying loyal to my brother, but at the same time I knew that the others relied on me. Notice how I say me instead of Javier, since I was actually starting to get invested in the story. With episode 3 though, while the choices were all mostly good, there wasn't really one that stood out in the end. I say that the choices in episode 4 had a much bigger impact on the story. Choices like deciding between Ava, your brother's friend, or Trip, someone that I had personally grown to enjoy in episode 3. Decisions about whether or not to have Javier be in a relationship with Kate, another one from episode 4 that genuinely had me stumped for a few minutes. But in the end, I prematurely accepted Kate's proposal, since I could tell Javier did have feelings for her, so I just did it for the sake of doing it. It really didn't feel like it was me making that choice, which seriously sucks since they removed the rewind feature from the game, so you're stuck with your choices, not like it makes any difference, because if Telltale wants something to happen, it'll just happen, but it is a shame that I can't change that one choice. And to just quickly compare something, take The Witcher 3 for example. Why is it that in that game your choices actually affect the story and the outcome? Why is it that, depending on what quests you choose to do and choose not to do, some of the people that gave you those quests just won't help you later in the game? So why is it that a massive game like The Witcher 3 can do all this so well, while juggling several other things, and yet Telltale can't? It's not as if we play these games for the gameplay, and what other reason is there to actually play these games? It's what people call the illusion of choice, and it's become very noticeable in the last few years. I guess having branching options and actual interesting choices is just too much for Telltale. But either way, the choices are still most definitely bullshit, and I doubt this will change with any Telltale game. That was an unintentional run. So this is probably the one thing that I really wanted to talk about the most. But let's first start with something that initially had me worried, which was the fact that we would not be playing as Clementine. But I'll be perfectly honest, it didn't really bother me. Although that's not to say that Javier is a great protagonist. He's not a bad character at all, but he wasn't anywhere near as good a character as Lee, or even Luke for that matter. But I don't hate the guy. But that's one of the major problems with Season 3. The characters. They are shit. The only reason Season 1 and 2 were so good was because the characters, especially in Season 1, were great. Characters like Lily, Larry, Carly, Ben, Duck, Kenny, and so many more made Season 1 better than it should have been. And while Season 2 doesn't have better characters, there's Luke, Carver, Jane, Kenny again, and a couple more. I'll be honest, I dislike most of the characters in Season 2. But that's not because they're badly developed. No, they're just fucking stupid and contribute nothing to the survival of the group, while also relying on an 11-year-old Clementine to do everything for them. That or they're just straight up forgettable. Another thing about the characters is that there's no real villain this time, just like in Season 1. In Season 2, the addition of Carver was very welcome, as he was a great villain. The kind you hate to love, but love to hate. He was very relatable, and a lot of the things he said made sense. With Season 1, there were a few antagonists here and there, but no real villain. And, in my opinion, this worked really well, as you cared about the main characters so much that if there was a villain, you wouldn't give a shit and it probably wouldn't have added much overall. With Season 3, however, most of the characters are bland and unlikable, so if there was a main villain, that probably wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Although there is technically a villain. This whole New Frontier thing is the villain. So pretty much another crew like Carver's, except these guys brand themselves. And the leader is Joan, a right bitch with some nice hair that Kenny Omega would be a fan of. All they really do is raid other communities for their own benefit, and they killed Mariana, But who cares? I was just distracted by her hair every time I saw her. Plus, you can kill Joan at the end of episode 4, even though she's only introduced in episode 3. Great character development there. Could have been an interesting villain, but just ended up being a very predictable and boring one. Let's now talk about Clementine, and something that Telltale recently said, which was that Season 3 is about family, and in some sense, they're right. But it really says a lot about how weak these characters are when I relate to Clementine more than my character's actual family. But again, I do think they're right, because to me, in this world, Clementine is my family. So it's almost as if they want us to like Clementine more than our actual family, since they knew that would be the case anyway. But just ask yourself, what would really be different if she wasn't there? Other people knew about the New Frontier already, so we don't need her for that, but that's what she's used for in this game. She's a plot device because Telltale couldn't think of a better way to have her in the game, and they knew that no one would really care if Clementine wasn't there. If you're going to put the best character in a new season, give her a reason for being there, a motivation, something that I can get behind, and I do not mean getting together with that little shithead Gabe. If this actually happens in Season 4, then I'm done. Besides her wanting to find AJ, which is honestly such a stupid subplot, there's nothing in this game for Clementine. Her character arc from Season 1 to Season 2 is complete, and nothing about her is more interesting or well developed in this season, besides some admittedly good scenes about Clementine going through puberty. They were a nice touch since it's something realistic that made me connect with her more for some reason. But compare Clementine in this game to Kenny in Season 2. When we first saw Kenny, it made no sense at all, and it felt like he was just there to have a character that we had previously known. At first, I was actually annoyed when I thought about it, since I wanted an explanation as to how he survived, which never actually gets explained, which still annoys me even now. But Kenny wasn't just there for the sake of being there, he had a purpose. He had a new girlfriend, he was with a group, and he eventually goes a bit mental, trying to look after AJ. But he was an integral part of the story, and the game would have been much different without his presence. Whereas with Clementine in Season 3, I really can't say the same thing, since she doesn't feel like an important aspect of the story. But I think at the end of the day, the smart thing would have been to not include her, because Season 2 is Clementine's story, Season 3 is Javier's story. But maybe by not having her in the game as much, they were really just savoring the moments when she was there. Clementine is the core of this series, the glue that sticks it all together, so why bother actually developing any new characters when we can just throw one in that people like? If I'm being totally honest, the characters are probably my least favorite thing about Season 3, and while I grew to enjoy some of them, I disliked most of them, and that didn't help me with trying to connect to the story, and as a result, I just didn't care about anything that was happening. I want to dedicate this last section to things that the game does well, or at least what I think the game does well, since I didn't really do this with my last video, and since it seems fair. I will also be ranking the episodes based on which is my favourite and which is my least favourite, obviously. For the most part, after episode 2, I somewhat enjoyed myself, so I don't completely hate this game at all. I just find it disappointing for many reasons, which I've already explained. But let's talk about each episode individually for a moment, starting with episode 1 of course. And as far as ranking the episodes, it's actually pretty easy for me. Episode 3, Episode 5, Episode 2, Episode 4, and Episode 1. And would you look at that, the third of something is my favourite. But first, there are a few minor things that I enjoyed that I want to talk about. First one goes without saying, Clementine. And she's great. She seriously makes this game far better than it would have been if she wasn't there. And while I don't think she needed to be there, like I just mentioned, I enjoyed having her there. I also liked David and I enjoyed the dynamic between him and Javier, and episode 5 is a great showcase of their relationship. Other than that, I seriously don't have much else to say, which is a shame, so I'll just talk about the episodes themselves now. Episode 1 is my least favorite episode in the season, and despite going in with low expectations, it still disappointed me. But it had some decent bits. It had a good introduction, and the ending was actually pretty shocking, with the death of Mariana, which was completely unnecessary. But other than that, it didn't do anything for me on an emotional level, and I didn't feel like anything that was happening actually mattered. So I'm giving episode 1 a 4 out of 10, since it's my least favorite episode in the whole series. And that includes The Walking Dead Michonne. Episode 2 is more of the same, but I for some reason enjoyed it more, due to characters like Jesus, and because there was some intrigue with this new frontier that people kept mentioning. It also features a terrible choice in which you either shoot Conrad or you sell out Clementine. Again. What is with Telltale trying to get us to sell out Clem this season? The ending to episode 2 was also pretty good, and it did have me interested in episode 3, even if it didn't make that much sense. So I'll give episode 2 a 6 out of 10. I like it more, but once again, nothing special. And now talking about episode 3. Like I said before, it's the best episode in the season, or at least my favourite. It does a good job of making your choices feel important and have some weight to them. For example, avenging Mariana by killing the guy that shot her was actually pretty satisfying, even if I don't think she should have died in the first episode, especially since, by episode 4, I had grown to dislike her brother Gabe. I think I mentioned before that I actually started to connect to some of these characters, even started liking some of them, and there was a sense of actual conflict between David, the character who's your brother, and Clementine, the best character in the series, and at times, I actually sided with David. That's insane and absolutely deserves some praise, since up until that point I had been siding with Clementine without a second thought. The ending was also well done and genuinely made me a bit pissed off at the villains, who, up until this point, had been fairly lackluster, which unfortunately continued for the rest of the game, even though episode 5 has nothing to do with them, which is a good thing. But the biggest praise I can give episode 3 is that it actually made me care about the story and the characters. Even if it was only momentarily, it still made me care, which is obviously a good thing. So, since it's the best episode in the season, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10, which may seem low for the best episode, but believe me when I say that it's quite a bit better than the other episodes, but doesn't compare to even the worst episodes from season 1 or 2. Episode 4 continues to move the story along at an admittedly slow pace, as nothing of too much importance happens until the ending. But there were a few good parts, like for example, the part when Gabe decides to tell Trip that Javier shot Conrad. And I'm gonna be perfectly honest here, I really hated Gabe after this, because I shot Conrad to save him. What a fucking idiot. At least Ben was actually somewhat relatable and a good character with an arc, depending on your choice to save him that is. This kid just tries too hard and comes off like an idiot that I can't relate to. I know he's trying to prove himself, but for fuck's sake, maybe think things through before just yelling that shit out. As far as the ending though, I don't have too many complaints. I thought it was intense, well paced, and that your choices did actually have some impact. Choosing between saving Ava or Trip was genuinely pretty hard, as I tried to think of what scenarios could happen because of this. And what do you know, they both just end up dying in episode 5, so that whole ending was actually pointless. Good old Telltale. But back to episode 4. Things quickly went to shit, and it once again ended with a cliffhanger, leading nicely into episode 5. So nothing really happened, and then the ending was good, and there were deaths and explosions and what have you, so I imagine most people liked it. But I'll give episode 4 a 5 out of 10, since it's better than the first episode, but is slightly worse than episode 2 and 3, since nothing really happens until the ending, but having a good ending doesn't make the episode good overall. And then episode 5, which reminds me a lot of episode 5 from season 1 and also from season 2, since a lot of the same scenarios happen. Moving across rooftops or a high place to get to somewhere important, a big fight between two pivotal characters, which was actually a great scene by the way, I really enjoyed this part. A last stand sort of situation, and a lot of deaths. While all these familiar things happen, they're not very impactful and just feel boring and flat. And that's a problem, since this is the last episode of the season, and when compared to the last episode of the other seasons, it doesn't feel epic or emotional in the slightest. But here's something that everyone is praising: multiple endings. Who fucking cares? I'm sorry, but why should I care about multiple endings when I know that season 4 will just have one continuous story that we're all experiencing? I'll admit, it is cool that there are different scenarios that can happen, but did we really have to wait a whole game to get it once at the end? And does anyone actually think it's going to be different depending on your choices? Especially when you look at how much season 2's endings impacted this season. Oh no. Oh wait. They were the worst part of each episode. Ooh, gotta say, I'm not feeling the hype, guys. But if we're actually being serious for a moment, I'm really just worried that what happened with the multiple endings in season 2 will happen with this season, since I really don't see how Telltale could pull off a bunch of different stories all at once. But you know what? I'm somewhat intrigued for season 4. It's too early for me to say whether or not season 4 is necessary, so I'm just gonna leave it out there. But despite these issues, I still enjoyed episode 5 more than most of the other episodes, even if it was pretty forgettable and let me down as far as emotional and impactful moments go. But overall, episode 5 gets a 6 out of 10, since it was mostly enjoyable, your choices actually did impact things, and the ending actually made me tear up a little bit, just seeing Clementine walk off by herself. So overall, based on what I think the game does well, I'm going to give The Walking Dead: A New Frontier a 4 out of 10, which is definitely a lower score than I was hoping I would give it back before I had played episode 1, but I really don't see any reason to give it a higher score than this, since to me, the game does hardly anything well. And the few things it does do well, mainly the dynamic between Javier and David, and Clementine in general, just isn't enough to redeem the whole season, and those are pretty much the only things I can think of that weren't poorly done. I can really sum the game up with this: even the best episodes from season 3 are still worse than the worst episodes of seasons 1 and 2, which is just very disappointing and makes me worried for the inevitable 4th season. And I know that I have been comparing this game to seasons 1 and 2 a lot, but I do feel as if it's justified, since that's what you're meant to do with sequels. Compare them to the previous game to see what was done better, and that's what I've done with this game. So I don't want to make it out as if the only reason I dislike this game is because it isn't as good as season 1 or 2, or because Clementine wasn't in it as much, because that's not the case at all. I even said earlier that I don't think Clementine should have been in the game at all. I just don't think it's a good game on its own, and since it is a Walking Dead game, that just makes it more of a disappointment for me. I try not to sound too harsh when talking about games, but this is not objectively a great game, and that's what usually annoys me, when people say something is a great game when it's really not a great game. You just thought it was great, which is fine, but don't make it out to be something it isn't. So again, it's totally fine if you thought the game was great, and I have no problem with that, but that doesn't just make it a great game overall. But don't get me wrong, A New Frontier on its own, when not compared to the other games, is not what I would consider to be a terrible game, since I did enjoy episodes 2, 3, and 5 after all. It was just a very big disappointment when you compare it to season 1 and 2, and it's nowhere near the level of those games in terms of the characters, story, and the tough decisions you had to make that will have an impact on characters you genuinely cared about. But then I kind of contradict myself, because while I don't really think it's a terrible game when compared to season 1 and 2, it does nothing to improve upon those games in any meaningful way. There's nothing about season 3 that I feel is done better than in season 1 or 2. So then I must ask, what was the point in making a season 3 when you're not going to try and improve upon anything the first two games did? Why did this game even need to be made? Why was Clementine even there? Oh, that's right, because no one would have cared about this game if she wasn't there. Who was this game made for? I don't think anyone that played the first 2 games wanted another one, so I guess it's for people that couldn't be bothered playing those 2 games. But since this game is more standalone, that's probably the best way to play it. The only thing Season 3 does that I don't think the others do is, altogether now, the dynamic between Javier and David. 2 brothers who both have feelings for the same person, which is interesting, since it's never happened in the series before. But I ended up just not caring because the person they're fighting over, Kate, is not a character I like or care about. So again, why did there even need to be a Season 3? Well, I can explain that one, since Episode 5 proved something to me, and more specifically what the ending of Episode 5 proved to me, is that this season was just filler. This is why they didn't actually call this game Season 3. It's filler because by the end of Episode 5, the story gets back on track with the end of Season 2, whereas this season seriously deviated away from Season 2. It was really just a waste of time when they could have focused on continuing Clementine's story instead of introducing a bunch of characters, only to just go back to what they were originally going to do, which would have been fine if the game itself was at least fine. I'm all for Telltale trying to tell a new story, like I said earlier, but this season was not a new story. It was just the same old shit as in Season 1 and 2. If there were at least a few characters that were unique or interesting, then I would have been able to get lost in this world. But I didn't because all the characters just remind me of their better versions from the other games. So I should really just go and play the other games instead. But if I may ask a question, to those of you that like this game, why do you like it? Seriously, let me know in the comments, because I'd love to know how you feel about it, since it seems like the majority of people were also disappointed with this game. But if you do enjoy it, then that's good, and I'm glad you're able to enjoy it, and I would like to know why that is. Also, just for the purposes of this video, I recently decided to continue playing The Walking Dead Michonne, which I'd given up on over a year ago due to the first episode being terrible, much like the first episode of this season. So I played episodes 2 and 3, and episode 2, literally on its own, redeemed that entire game. The episode was short, but didn't overstay its welcome, it got straight to the point, the story got more interesting, and surprisingly enough, I really enjoyed it. And this will sound crazy, but I think I enjoyed that game more than I did A New Frontier. Maybe that's just because it's more fresh in my mind though. But to be fair, a lot of these criticisms can easily be applied to Season 1 and 2, as well as Season 3. But Seasons 1 and 2 managed to do a lot of other things well that it just doesn't impact my personal experience as much as with Season 3. Like I mentioned in the video, Seasons 1 and 2 are only as good as they are because of the characters, at least to me. It's just about the only thing those games do that I find to be somewhat unique, so that's pretty much the main reason I didn't like Season 3. Moving forward from Season 3, I'm cautiously optimistic to see what Telltale will do next. Oh wait, they just announced Season 2 of Minecraft Story Mode. Yep, I'm done. For real though, can you please make a game that isn't a sequel or an adaptation of something, or maybe stop making 10 games at once and actually take your time with it? Anyway, as far as The Walking Dead goes, I feel like things have just really worn off at this point. Whenever a new episode released from Season 1 or 2, I immediately downloaded it and played it as soon as I possibly could, whereas with Season 3, I just play it because it's there or because I feel I should play it. Even though I enjoyed some episodes, there was no real impact, and even if there was some, it didn't stick with me for that long. So once I had finished the episodes, I didn't get the feeling that I really wanted to know what would happen next. With these episodes, you finish it and it's just kind of like, well, alright then, guess I'll just wait for the next one. Whereas with Season 1 and 2, and their incredibly annoying cliffhangers, I was always so excited for the next episode because I was so invested. And since Season 3 hasn't had me invested, there is a part of me that wishes Season 3 just hadn't been made in the first place, because it just wasn't necessary at all. I really hope that Telltale will make the importance of player choice a bigger factor in Season 4, but who knows. Really the only thing I can say is that at least Telltale were trying to make a great game. Apart from a lot of stupid things, it does seem like, for the most part, that Telltale were trying their best to make a great game, so I can at least applaud them for trying. Even if it's hard to tell which projects they're actually passionate about these days. I mean, just look at the amount of games they've released since the first Walking Dead game just 5 years ago, and most of their games have just gotten worse since after Tales from the Borderlands. But here's a fun fact, Telltale Games was founded on my birthday, so that's cool. In case anyone is bothered, the original idea for this video was to go in depth with the first 3 episodes and then a second video about the last 2 episodes, in which I would pretty much talk about everything, but that would have taken way too long. So after writing for about 1,000 minutes, I said, you know what, screw that shit, and I just started writing this instead. After having read through all of this, I feel pretty confident in saying that I actually think it's much better than my Uncharted 4 video. You can let me know what you think, if you want to. But hopefully you can understand why I was hoping for much more than what we eventually got. Once again, this is just my opinion, so don't take it personally if you disagree with what I say. Actually, just don't take anything I say seriously, because my opinion really shouldn't matter to you if you do like this game. I'm really just a random person online talking shit about games, and if that bothers you, just don't watch it. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this very nitpicky review discussion of The Walking Dead: A New Frontier, and mainly I just hope that I could get some points across and hopefully you could see where I was coming from. I do have some other ideas for videos, but at this point in time, I can't guarantee I will make another video for a little while, but I will try and keep making videos as regularly as I can. And if you would maybe like to see me talk about a specific game, then you can let me know on Twitter or just in the comments and I'll try my best to do it. But until next time, I've been Laughing Cat, and you've just wasted your time watching my video, but I appreciate it either way. Thanks for watching.